Main system, activating combat mode.
Humanity has spread out from the radiated disaster zone that Earth had become, spread out into the stars looking for new homes. One such home was the planet Rubicon 3, with its precious natural resource of coral, a wonder of science and nature, an extremely valuable energy source that would make anyone that controls it rich and powerful beyond imagination. With coral comes power. Where there's coral, there's blood. What is coral? Coral is an organic substance capable of self-propagation. The speed at which it proliferates is determined by the density of the colony. As such, a vacuum would provide an ideal environment to maximize coral density and thus growth. However, one must not overlook the signs of mutation within the coral brought about by this density effect. Is it mutations such as these that will bring about a collapse that humanity has no hope of controlling? What does the coral represent, if not sheer potential? Professor Nagai was one of the leading figures in the Rubicon Research Institute. The Rubicon Research Institute was the first major organization on Rubicon to investigate the coral and how to exploit it. The Institute built vast mining, drilling, and research facilities on the surface of Rubicon and underground, where they would have easier access to the coral for research. This vast underground city dedicated to the research of coral was called Institute City. Professor Nagai was assisted in his research by his two assistants. The first assistant would be lost in time to his research. He would dedicate his entire being to the research of the coral, casting aside his wife, child, and his health. Professor Nagai watched his assistant descend into coral-driven madness. Maybe the assistant was consuming the coral as a narcotic, like some of the Rubiconians did on the surface? No matter. The assistant's wife would pass on in time, so the professor would have the assistant's son moved into the lab so he could be around adults that would care for him. The boy would show himself to be resilient and tough beyond his years. With the help of the second assistant, they would take care of him and make him toys, trying to put a smile on the little boy's face. For a moment, things looked to be going well. Research on this fiery, ethereal substance promised huge strides in many areas of technology, such as energy, human augmentation, defense, and armor cores. The work they were doing underground Rubicon in their labs, in these vast caverns, would change the galaxy. They just didn't know how it would change the galaxy. One fateful day, Professor Nagai noticed an alarm sensor pinging. Normally, you could dismiss most alarms as a spec limit being set too tight or being out of date, but not this one. He pulled up the data logs for the sensor and felt his heart drop when he realized what he was looking at. The coral was surging at rates they didn't even anticipate to be possible. Coral density was about to go exponential, which would lead it to grow even faster. It would only be a matter of days before coral would start releasing itself into the vacuum of space, where its growth would continue completely unhindered. The symbiosis of the coral released must be stopped at all costs. You see, the coral grows best when 1, in vacuum, and 2, it's allowed to congregate. In the vacuum of space, with nothing separating or containing the coral, it would be able to grow beyond comprehension. Exponential growth in the infinite vacuum of space. It would be able to spread out into the solar system, grow out towards the galactic core, and then spread out across the spiral arms of the galaxy. If the coral got into space, in time, there would be no humanity without the coral. He must stop the release, activate the Ibis protocol, and burn the entire fucking planet if need be. The Institute was aware of these outside possibilities and had engineered some fail-safes into their organization and structure. The Ibis program, a series of intelligent coral-powered ACs with the sole mission of stopping the coral release. It was the metaphorical big red button. Dr. Nagai smashed the button as hard as he could. Project Ibis must be deployed. The world of Rubicon and the coral must burn, and the galaxy must be preserved. How much time do we have? 47 hours, 2 minutes, 16 seconds. It was long enough to get the boy off planet. The professor has some friends in the orbital colonies around Jupiter. The boy would be safe there and would be able to grow up. His other assistant would have time to execute her plans. She had her ways. She would seek shelter in deep underground safe rooms and wait out the fire and carry on with the Institute's work once the cinders of the fire had cooled. Like Icarus, flying too close to the sun and having the wax in his wings melted, so did the Institute fly too close to the coral. Rubicon burned in the Fires of Ibis, a firestorm of cosmic proportions. The flames from the fire reached out and burned the entire solar system of Rubicon, annihilating the surfaces of the other planets, but sparing the further galaxy. This devastation, which turned Rubicon into a burning star system, killed countless people and burned away the majority of life in the system, as well as destroying technology and infrastructure, wiping out all of the system's civilization. The involvement of the Ibis series in the disaster led to the cataclysm being remembered as the Fire of Ibis. The surviving assistant, Carla, would stay on the planet to continue the mission of protecting the galaxy from the coral. The boy would return in time. 50 years would pass, but the boy, now a man, would return with an AC under his command to carry out his mission of protecting the galaxy from burning once word of the coral resurgence got out. A mysterious new substance called coral was discovered on a remote planet, Rubicon 3. As an energy source, this substance was expected to dramatically advance humanity's technological and communication capabilities. Instead, it caused a catastrophe that engulfed the planet and the surrounding stars in flames and storms, forming a burning star system. Almost half a century later, coral has resurfaced on Rubicon 3. Extraterrestrial corporations and resistant groups fight over control of the substance. Coral appears naturally as a red, wispy mass, comprised of large masses of microorganisms able to interact and communicate with each other over vast distances. It is able to grow and reproduce over time under good conditions, and in ideal conditions like the vacuum of space, can propagate more quickly. Coral can be used as fuel, either for engines or for weaponry, due to its extremely high energy output. Due to their reproductive nature, coral can power machines for decades even without refueling or maintenance. Its high energy output, however, makes it dangerous due to its volatility, as coral can unleash vast amounts of energy if ignited, leading to large-scale cataclysms such as the Fire of Ibis. Coral is capable of manifesting sentient information patterns similar to sentient artificial intelligences, which certain people, namely augmented humans, can perceive as voices. This intelligence allows coral to be used as control systems for various machines, and free coral are also able to interact and control digital equipment as well, sometimes taking over equipment and machines. Typically, coral is found in deposits underground. However, when released into the atmosphere, they are able to stay up in the air, and in sufficient quantities can even move under their own power. Free coral masses are attracted to other large coral masses in a phenomenon called a coral convergence. Some have been able to hear the coral, generally after taking a large dose of it. It is unknown how the coral intelligences develop and why they are so capable of personality so comprehensible to humans. One possibility is that the coral absorbed human thoughts and emotions during the initial experiments, or that it somehow absorbed a part of humanity during the firestorm. Eventually, one Rubiconian would be able to make contact with an augmented human AC pilot and dictate the course of the coming coral war. The coral would also in time become central to the Rubiconian culture and religion, with some prophesizing an eventual human symbiosis with the coral. Others, like the Dozers, use coral as a recreational drug, though in what form is not expanded upon. Once the flames of the Fire of Ibis burnt out, a culturized and ash-filled planet remained. It was thought that the coral was dead and all burnt up. Little did they know. The firestorm of destruction of the coral and the flames rendered Rubicon 3 a barren wasteland, leaving the meager survivors to pick up the pieces. The horrors traumatized the survivors. The remnants of the Institute, which itself dissolved following their losses in the catastrophe, ash blocked out the sun, keeping the surface of the planet gray and cold. Very few planets grew on Rubicon, and there was nearly no animal life on the planet other than the mealworms underground. Not long after the firestorm came the PCA, the Planetary Closure Administration. The Planetary Closure Administration, PCA is an organization whose role is to restrict and control all access in and out of Rubicon 3. The PCA was set up to prevent another firestorm from ever happening again. The PCA became the de facto authority on the planet and declared to the galaxy that the coral had been completely destroyed. The PCA quickly took control of Institute City and any Institute relics that they found. For greater efficiency, the PCA and its military forces are all governed by a single AI. Shortly after arriving on Rubicon, the PCA started construction on the grid, megastructures to help contain any escaped coral and prevent access to the underground. At the same time, the closure system was built, a network of kill satellites designed to stop anyone from entering Rubicon's atmosphere unauthorized, while also maintaining complete air supremacy. In space, the massive and powerful suppression fleet remained on standby. ECM fog jammers were erected in the mysterious floating city Asylum to keep it secret. Deep in the central ice field, Watchpoint Alpha was set up in secret to monitor for underground core signatures. Other than the occasional skirmishes with the RLF, life on Rubicon started to settle down. The PCA was entrenched and restricting all traffic to the planet. The coral had been thought to be completely destroyed. The corporations and the galaxy had no interest in Rubicon 3 at that point. The Rubiconians were rebuilt, and their faith in the coral grew and matured into a faith and lifestyle. The Rubiconian survivors were from then on known as Cinders. The Cinders would go on to live their lives and rebuild. After the fire, the population would adapt to their new reality and grow, feeding coral to mealworms for food, consuming coral for recreation and religious rituals and purposes. But one day, among the Cinders, there was one of them that heard a voice. He had just ingested a large dose of coral and was able to hear a voice from the coral speaking to him, talking of a symbiosis. This moment would become the core of the religion of the Rubiconians. This man was Father Domayan. He would become the religious leader of the Rubiconian insurrection against the PCA. Father Domayan's arena card says, Father of the Rubiconian Liberation Front, veteran military commander, and founder of the School of Coral Mysticism. As a young man, Domayan was once a Dozer vagrant, until the Fire of Ibis burned the star system. In the fire's aftermath, he developed an ardent belief in the symbiosis with the coral. This belief formed the founding ideas of the RLF, ideas that have made martyrs of countless coral warriors. Rubiconians hadn't forgotten that their world had been burned by off-world scientists, all for profits for off-world corporations, and then the PCA had come to keep them prisoners on their own planet. Among the population, stories of the prosperity of the coral before the fires would circulate among the people, and out of this anger, the Rubiconian Liberation Front would be born, with Father Domayan as their spiritual leader. With time, things had reached a stasis and an equilibrium, until the Station 31 incident, when the first rumors of a coral resurgence on Rubicon would make it out to the galaxy, creating yet another gold rush to extract resources for corporate profits. A story as old as time, Branch is a hacktivist group consisting of 4 members, 3 of them being highly experienced mercenaries. Before the Station 31 incident, the PCA had full control over Rubicon 3 and their enforced quarantine. When Branch attacked Station 31, they leaked the secret information about the survival of coral in Rubicon 3 to the wider galaxy. This led to the corporations returning to the planet against the orders of the PCA. This angered the PCA, who also targeted the AC pilot Raven for elimination for his role in getting the secret information out. Not long after, corporations such as Balam and Arquebus, along with their subsidiaries, arrived and set up shop on the planet, plunging Rubicon into the state that it is today and putting into motion the events that would trigger the Coral War. Along with the corporations, a man who had been evacuated to Jupiter in the hours before the firestorm would return to his childhood home, looking for the lost Institute City where he had grown up, until his father's work had burnt it all down. This man, Handler Walter, had become part of Overseer, an organization formed after the fires. Their sole mission is to monitor the coral and to make sure that the cataclysm that enveloped the Rubicon star system would never happen again. So what is an AC? Armored cores evolved from the muscle tracer, MTs. MTs were originally simple robots designed to work in the underground cities following the Great Destruction. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, where they, along with their operators, were responsible for performing manual labor tasks such as construction. As tension increased between the corporations, MTs found themselves being designed for the battlefield instead, being repurposed with weapons. Over time, as the conflicts intensified, MTs began to undergo numerous upgrades and additional features, beginning to sport features like limbs and additional armor. Eventually, a unique humanoid silhouette and shape began to emerge, after which onlookers began to refer to them as armored cores. ACs, or armored cores, were piloted in battle by individuals known as Ravens, or AC pilots. In battle, an AC's firepower, agility, and armor make it a formidable threat. Without incredibly heavy weapons or a overwhelming force, taking on a Raven in his or her custom-built AC was often tantamount to suicide. However, all this power came at a cost. ACs were often incredibly costly to repair and maintain, and it was often important for Ravens to gain the favor of one of the major corporations in order to maintain a steady supply of funds to maintain their machines. There were some exceptions to this rule, however. Sometimes ACs were provided to incredibly skilled test pilots directly contracted under certain corporations, meaning the corporations would have their own in-house AC squads. In addition, there did exist some mass production ACs that traded performance for price. These units often still maintain individual superiority against most MTs and could mount AC grade weaponry, often sitting somewhere above mass production MTs, but falling short of customized non-production ACs. Ravens, who gained the favor of certain corporations, could also receive prototype or top-of-the-line parts as gifts or for testing purposes. What is an AC pilot? The Human Plus program and augmented humans. Human Plus is described as a pilot being cybernetically meshed with their AC to improve performance. This involves enhancing the skeletal, nervous, and muscular systems of the humans. In addition to AC pilots, Human Plus is also used to enhance bodyguards. However, this dangerous procedure is not without risk, especially when conducted on children. For example, the Human Plus operation stunted the growth of a young AC pilot candidate called Katarina. The cybernetics stiffened her muscles, leaving her barely able to express herself facially and rendering her largely mute. Though she was still capable of emotions and crying, the implants would eventually cause her heart to stop beating and result in her death. Transcending the human form was not without risk, but some were willing to take those risks, as long as someone else paid the price. Human Plus granted users a plethora of special attributes that cannot be accomplished with mere AC upgrades. As a result, the AC's performance shoots up to exponential levels. Human Plus is typically available to highly skilled Ravens or AI-guided ACs. It also opens up new possibilities with AC customization so that any setup, regardless of its irregular nature, can fight competently on the battlefield. During the events of the Cold War on Rubicon 3, Human Plus returns, but now it was referred to as Human Augmentation. Unlike previous iterations, the technology is far more widespread, with a history spanning decades at this point. Each successive generation of augmentation striving for refinements and increases in AC pilot aptitude, with varying degrees of success. There have been 10 generations in total. Generations 1 through 4, called the Old Generation, were invented before the Fire of Ibis and utilized coral technology, but recipients suffered numerous physiological and psychological side effects, chief of which has been referred to as a loss of humanity. Generations 5 and 6, the interim generation, arose after the Fire of Ibis and attempted to produce an analog for coral technology, but largely failed and were known to result in grisly complications. Lastly, Generations 7 through 10, the new generations, successfully implemented coral substitution technology, also called coral replacement technologies, which is touted as significantly safer and more consistent in its results. The augmentation process is stated to be a surgical procedure, with Generation 1 augmentations being described as having less than a 10% success rate. Generation 7 vastly improved the safety of the procedures, and Generation 10 augmented humans seemingly with far fewer side effects. Tinkering with concepts of humanity like this has started to blur the lines between humans and machines, or augmented humans. Tinkering with concepts of humanity like this started to blur the definition of what is a human, and blur the lines between humans and other types of improved humanity. The symbiosis of humans and engineering made for fearsome AC pilots, but at what cost? What did we lose when we gained the ability to direct human evolution? Would we lose anything if we merged with machines? But perhaps there was a better way. Maybe not. What would happen if humanity integrated with the coral the same way AC pilots would merge with technology? What do you get out of the symbiosis of humanity and the fiery coral? Is it an elevation of humanity or a perversion? Augmented Human C4621 Raven is an augmented human of Generation 4. Recipients of Generation 4 augmentations are described by Handler Walter as being emotionally withdrawn and having unstable augmentations. Upon the return of Walter along with 621 to Rubicon, Walter and Raven immediately start working together as independent mercenaries. In addition, there are AC assembly series made specifically for augmented humans referred to as the Mind series. These were crafted by ALLMIND to further evolve the fusion between man and machine. During the Coral War, one petty and vindictive AC pilot had his mind merged with the AI in specialized machines made from 621's combat data in an attempt to even the odds with his most hated enemy, and at one point during the last stretch, the pilot was overrun by the AI entirely. The Great Destruction. As we mentioned before, the invention of ACs was in part driven by the events of the Great Destruction caused by warfare on Earth. At one point on Earth, the giant orbital weapon system called Justice was built and used by the Murakumo Millennium Corporation. The resulting destruction forced mankind underground for centuries due to the radiation unleashed on the Earth's surface, rendering it inhabitable. Great layered cities would be built underground by the surviving nations after the Justice Cannon laid waste to the surface with Kojima radiation. The survivors of this radiative miasma would wait underneath the Earth's surface for the planet to become inhabitable again. As these cities required a massive degree of administration to fulfill the needs of its inhabitants, layered cities were usually governed by advanced AIs. Layered cities were self-sustaining and provided their inhabitants with every need, including artificial sun, air, energy, and food. They also have significant industrial capabilities that enable them to manufacture products like MTs. Sometime after the Great Destruction, a lone Armored Core managed to redirect power from the Arteria facility to activate several anti-satellite batteries across the globe, clearing a path into space for mankind to escape the planet. But redirecting the power had cost hundreds of millions of lives that had been airborne aboard the Kratos, large flying colonies that had previously been dependent on the Arteria facility's energy to remain airborne. These actions would free some humans from Earth, providing a path to space, while condemning 100 million people to death as their airborne Kratos crashed into the ground. Kratos are massive airship colonies holding millions of civilians flying at some 7,000 meters above the ground. The League of Ruling Companies had created them to save the elites from the rising pollution on the surface of the planet following the catastrophic end of the war that radiated the Earth's surface. At one point, the Kratos housed half of humanity during the times of the economic war. The primary power source of the Kratos are ground-based power production facilities known as Arteria, which would then transmit the power to the airships via microwave. The secondary power sources were hydrogen fuel cells. If the power to the Kratos from the Arteria facilities is cut, the airships were designed to glide back down to the ground using their fuel cells as emergency power, though they would be landing on a heavily irradiated and poisoned Earth. However, if the engines are destroyed directly, the Kratos will lose their ability to glide and come crashing back down to Earth, trapping its inhabitants in falling metal tombs. When the power source of Arteria was severed, it forced the crash landing of all the in-flight Kratos around the world, along with the hundreds of millions of them. About half of humanity was lost in one day due to the acts of the old king. In time, more and more of humanity would escape the poisoned earth and seek its destinies in the stars, hoping for a fresh start, remembering how warfare destroyed the planet that had been home to humanity at one point. And, all along, humanity and the lives of billions, on Earth or otherwise, danced to the tune of the corporations, who had been thriving during a time of immeasurable suffering for humanity. Wait, that sounds familiar. Today, at first glance, Rubicon appears to be a dark, cold, frigid planet. Thick ash cover limits the amount of heat and light that makes it to the surface. Cinder clouds block out the sun, preventing plant life from growing easily and keeping much of the planet cold. But it does make for some beautiful sunsets when the sun does make it through the clouds of ash, showering the planet in a red glow. Rubicon is a planet devoid of much life. Well, the entire system has been mostly lifeless since the firestorm 50 years ago that burned Rubicon and every planet in the system in a blast of flames unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. A remote planet, it didn't have too much of a population, especially not after the calamity. A large part of the population had been involved in the extraction or research of the coral at different times of its history. The PCA maintained a ring of satellites around the system, meant to destroy anyone seeking unauthorized access to the planet. Nothing goes into Rubicon, nothing comes out. Though devastated, massive industrial structures, remnants of the Institute, PCA facilities like the grid, spaceport, power plants, and even cities could now be found on the surface of Rubicon. In the years since the fires, the Rubiconians would build towers, dams, fortress, mining platforms, and more. Slowly, the planet was coming back to life. Out of caution and paranoia, no further research on the coral had been carried out since the firestorm. It was believed that the coral had all been eradicated in the fire, but as things healed afterwards, the coral would resurface, new traces and evidence of a coral resurgence making its way through the galaxy after Raven's data hack. Corporations started preparing heavy mining equipment and mobilizing their HC squads for deployment. A new gold rush would be occurring on this planet as the corporations rush in to invade and extract the valuable resource that is a source of nearly endless power, and with that, wealth and riches. The coral must flow. But the scientists and the corporations weren't the only forces on Rubicon. The survivors of the firestorm still live on the planet and have raised new generations of Rubiconians who fight to control the extraction of their planet's coral and their liberation from off-world corporations who see the planet as a war prize to loot. Rubicon belonged to the Rubiconians. They would resist the corporate efforts to destroy yet another planet for their profit margins. Present-day groups on modern Rubicon. Ravens. A Raven is an Armored Core pilot under the employ of a private military company. Ravens are highly sought after by corporations, terrorists, city guards, and warlords to perform tasks that would be considered too difficult or politically damaging for a normal military unit to engage in. While the names of the companies that handle Raven contracts have changed over time, the function of Ravens themselves remain largely the same: carry out missions given by the highest bidder. Because the companies that employ these mercenaries are neutral in affiliation, Ravens are free to work for whomever they wish. Because of this, it's not uncommon for Ravens employed by opposing entities to fight each other on the battlefield. The unstable nature of a Raven's work and affiliation can lead to complicated relationships among each other and the companies, leaving most Ravens to lead a detached life. In addition for carrying out missions for corporate clients, Ravens often participate in an arena league administered by the organization that they work for. These matches are broadcast for additional revenue, and more popular skilled Ravens can earn an easy living as arena combatants. It should be noted that while all Ravens are Armored Core pilots, not all Armored Core pilots are Ravens. The more affluent organizations have a stable of in-house Armored Core pilots, as was the case with the Frighteners, which was a special force unit of the Earth government, and the Vespers, the in-house squad of AC pilots for the Arquebus Corporation. Ravens are a very skilled group that are highly capable and very accomplished in warfare. They have been known to handle most situations which would be difficult to impossible with conventional weapons and MTs. In most scenarios, Simply having a Raven on your side guarantees success in a mission, unless an opposing corporation decides to hire one as well. Any Raven can be hired for the right price, and the client usually has many to choose from. Most Ravens are very reliable, carrying out their missions even if it costs them their life. They are also confidential on all matters concerning missions. There have been times where companies have eliminated outsiders or even people inside their organization for knowing too much, but there has never been a documented case where a Raven has been eliminated for any such reason. By outsourcing the most dangerous jobs to mercenaries, companies can avoid having to completely cover the costs of directly owning such expensive machines. Ravens are very difficult to control, as a majority of them only answer to a Raven organization, meaning that any job that they give must first go through said group. But they are also horribly expensive to hire, with some jobs paying the same amount as needed to buy a brand new fully equipped Armored Core or several MTs. This is especially true for company exclusive Ravens, which are capable of bankrupting the company with their high salaries. On top of this, Ravens charge by the mission, meaning that in order to continue using the Raven's services, it is necessary to constantly send out mission requests. During the events of the Cold War, 621 is referred to as Independent Mercenary 621 Raven. 621 takes up the call sign from the wreckage of an AC following their descent onto Rubicon 3 in order to legally operate as an independent mercenary. Later on, 621 encounters the real Raven after they had decimated an entire PCA fleet by themselves and engages with their imposter, their operator, stating that they came to test a mercenary to see whether or not they were worthy of the name. The real Raven ends up losing, with their operator passing on the title to 621. Ayre later revealed that the name was not a call sign, but a term originally used for all independent mercenaries. In an age where they were free to take on any jobs, the Raven's wings symbolizing their freedom. The Arquebus Corporation, the more established and sophisticated of the two main corporations in the Cold War, having an internal culture more akin to the business and corporate world. Their manner of speaking is more businesslike and professional, and at times nearly aristocratic. Deputy Commander V2 Snail shows a clear sense of superiority and disdain towards Raven, frequently referring to him as a dog or hound. But then again, Snail saw everyone as beneath him. His arena card tells us, after receiving Generation 8 augmentation surgery, Snail continued to receive follow-up treatments as new technologies entered the mainstream, so as to make their merits his own. Many augmented humans have died in order to assure the safety of his repeated adjustments. The Arquebus in-house AC unit are the Vespers. Their naming nomenclature is a V followed by a rank number, with V1 being the leader and V2 being the deputy commander. Intercepted comms will show that Arquebus was planning on setting up re-education labor camps for the local Rubiconians if they had been able to take control. Arquebus didn't have much concern for people they looked down upon. Balam, the testosterone corporation led by G1 Michigan, a merciless, heavy-handed ogre of a man, and he was equally feared by friend and foe alike who knew him as Hell on 4 legs. Balam is a more militaristic organization, preserving the bravado associated with eager soldiers. For example, G6 Red communicates nearly exclusively through barking and sounds very much like a drill sergeant, which stands in stark contrast of how Arquebus briefings are delivered to you. Balam would frequently have to play catch-up to Arquebus in the Cold War. The Balam AC squad are the Red Guns. Like the Vespers, they also have a numbered rank system, but trading out the V for a G. So G1 is the commander, and G13 would be a new recruit. Also, Balam does seem to maintain internal superstitions, with some members thinking that the number 13, and consequently the name G13, is unlucky and cursed, and shouldn't be used for the well-being of the squad. Handler Walter reminds you, don't let the Red Guns teach you bad manners. Dozers and RAD. Other than the RLF, the other major Rubiconian faction would be the Dozers, known for being able technicians and practical when it came to scavenging equipment and parts. They were a loose association of groups trying to eke out a life on Rubicon. Some Dozers would consume thoroughly recreationally as a narcotic, since it, quote, hits your brain with a pop and a sizzle. One of the most scientifically and technically capable of them is the group RAD. In the years before the Cold War, They had gotten a new leader, an extremely capable mine and tinkerer, Cinder Carla, the former assistant of Professor Nagai from Institute City. She had taken over the RAD Dozer faction and made it into a powerful arms-dealing group. RAD would frequently have to deal with other Dozer groups trying to push in on their territory and steal their tech. An example of such theft is the theft of AC Milktooth by Honest Brute. He was not really an honest brute, but he was oddly poetic, describing using an AC to a classical ballroom dance. Honest Brute's arena card says he is a psychopath and a pathological liar. Given his honesty, I suspect that he's not very good at ballroom dance. Iguazu is a better dancer than Honest Brute, but that's not saying much. ALLMIND. ALLMIND is an artificial intelligence, mercenary liaison organization, and weapons manufacturer operating on the planet Rubicon 3 during the Coral War. It is primarily responsible for providing logistical support to various mercenaries, including access to its various services and facilities, including the parts shop, its simulator, and the virtual arena. ALLMIND is constantly looking for more combat data to feed to its AI to improve its combat simulation skills. Though in the background at first, ALLMIND's secretive role would play a decisive part in dictating how the Coral War would play out. The events of the Coral War, the die has been cast. Upon arriving on Rubicon 3, under the direction of Handler Walter, Raven takes low-level missions to build a reputation for himself. Raven accepts a mission to destroy the RLF artillery installations, sweeping Grid 135 and wiping out all of the Dafeng MT squads there. During an early mission to destroy some of the RLF logistic capabilities, we hear some radio chatter among the RLF soldiers. They seem naive and inexperienced, but brave and noble.
It's here. Fight back. We're no match for an AC. Have no fear. The coral is with us.
Looks like they've got a Baus tetrapod. It's a cut above the other MTs. Ignore it and focus on the mission.
The pilot of the tetrapod AC seems surprised when he experiences an ACS overload, as if the pilot hadn't finished training on the AC or was rushed out early to the field. We also hear what the Rubiconians piloting the MTs say to each other, how they steel their nerves with slogans of their revolution and their faith. Forged in ashes, we stand together. The Rubiconians knew they faced impossible odds, yet still threw themselves at the invaders with a bravery that was hard not to notice as Raven destroys their MTs and launches ordnance their way. In spite of this display of nobility and bravery, they fought for their freedom. They had been imprisoned here and governed by the PCA's AI for over 50 years. But Raven was on a contract and had a job to do. It was only business. A contract to destroy a tester AC shows the willingness of the corporations and of all parties on Rubicon to throw recruits into the meat grinder with no regard for life, only for furthering their own goals. The pilot of the tester AC must have been a fresh recruit to still have such noble illusions of the battlefield. His combat career ends almost as soon as it started, as he gets ambushed by Raven. Raven is far more experienced and better suited for this duel. The tester AC never stood a chance. I wonder if the pilot of the tester AC would have met his fate with the bravery of the Rubiconians if he had known he was being marched out to his death. During briefings and calls between Handler Walter and the corporations, Raven hears something about Operation Wall Climber and who would be chosen to go on that mission. The Wall referred to a Liberation Front fortress, the Wall, a defensive position made out of a dam that is a mountain of reinforced and armored concrete and heavy artillery, further protected by the Juggernaut mobile artillery platform. Any hostile force getting within gun range of the Wall would quickly be annihilated under a barrage of artillery so thick it would block out the sun. Arquebus had its eye on the Wall and wanted to rip it out of the control of the Rubiconians. Doing so would further their positioning on Rubicon, and they would be able to make Balam look bad. Raven goes on his first mission with the members of the Red Guns, G4 Volta in his heavy tank AC, and G5 Iguazu, who would quickly grow to resent Raven. No one liked Iguazu. However the mission plays out, Raven clearly proves his combat worth and demonstrates he is a combat powerhouse on Rubicon 3. It's on this mission that Index Gunham, another member of the Fist of the ROF, makes a brave stand against the combined forces of the Red Guns and Raven, quickly falling to their combined might in spite of Dunham's bravado and faith. Before he is ended, he curses you for doing the work of the corporations that only exist to generate profit and to strip the wealth of the working people, like vultures. The Rubiconians had suffered so much, all they wanted was to be left alone. But the galaxy had determined that the coral was too important to leave the planet of Rubicon alone. He died, lamenting having failed Father Domayan. Index Gunham's sacrifice raises the question of what was worth fighting for. Yourself? Profit. Your in-group. What was the purpose of humanity? What would be the next step for humanity? Did we have a purpose? To change, grow, and evolve? Soon after, Raven is offered contracts to either defend or destroy the RLF flagship, the converted weaponized mining ship the Strider. This gigantic landship had been converted at great cost from a mobile coral extraction mining ship to a military asset, showing both the desperation and the resourcefulness of the RLF. Their ingenuity and total commitment to the War of Independence was clearly visible. The Strider is the base upon which the RLF military plans to liberate the planet rest on. They didn't have a need for industrial equipment if they couldn't free themselves from the off-road corporations that came rushing in when they heard traces of coral had been detected again. The Rubiconians had survived the firestorm. They would survive Arquebus, Balam, ALLMIND, and the PCA. It's during this escort mission that Walter and Raven get the first pieces of evidence of a wider conspiracy at work on Rubicon 3. By the time Raven arrived to provide escort, the Strider had already been destroyed by MTs that don't look like anything the Corps had used, an older, yet extraordinarily fast type of MT that Raven had a hard time keeping up with. They would be reinforced by weaponized wheels that were of a unique design. Someone had gotten access to the Institute's old relics and attacked the Strider. But who? Arquebus and Balam had not had access to any Institute facilities yet, and the PCA hadn't bothered digging further underground searching for Institute relics. Who did that leave? Before having much time to ponder this mystery, Raven is offered a chance to join Operation Wall Climber for Arquebus. Fighting his way to the top of the fortress, Raven is backed up by Rusty of the Vesper Squad to take on the centerpiece of the RLF resistance here, the Juggernaut, a mobile mountain of steel and artillery. Rusty and Raven are able to exploit its exposed rear side and take it down. After the mission, your buddy, Rusty, contacts Raven. After the mission, Raven's buddy, Rusty, contacts him and reveals that Arquebus had sent him in by himself in hopes of taking out two problems with one stroke, to have Raven and the Juggernaut destroy each other, removing both from future battles. The Vesper Squad was only going to be deployed after Raven was destroyed. Thanks, buddy. We like Rusty. The corporations only saw profit and wealth. They would ruthlessly remove any potential obstacle towards that goal. Life meant nothing to them when it came to their end-of-year profits. An odd contract gets offered to Raven on behalf of one Kate Markson, an unknown mercenary that is herself hiring a mercenary. Kate seems to be working alongside the artificial intelligence ALLMIND. Her AC was made of ALLMIND parts, unlike pretty much every other AC Raven has encountered on Rubicon, which were mostly made of parts from Arquebus, Balam, and their smaller subsidiaries. That was odd. Even more odd was that usually only corporations hired mercenaries, not other mercenaries. During this mission, we find out that neither Handler Walter nor the PCA is able to find any registry of Kate in any records, nor in the arena roster of registered mercenaries. Yet, she sported a sleek ALLMIND styled AC, not the type that you found very often. There's something going on here, past the corporations scheming to control the coral here. First the weird MTs that took down the Strider, now this mystery Merc and its unique gear. Not long after, Walter passes on the contract from his friend. No further information on the friend is given. Is Walter hiding something? The mission is to destroy equipment at the center of Watchpoint Delta in northern Belius. A watchpoint is a massive borehole into the ground where coral was once extracted from. Now that the coral underneath is dormant, it is used as an observation station for the underground coral currents. But something unexpected that would change the events of the Coral War happened here. Approaching the facility, Raven encounters the independent mercenary Sula. The PCA didn't hire Mercs, so why was one guarding a PCA facility? Furthermore, Sula's AC also had ALLMIND components like Kate's did. Sula didn't tell us who he was working for. That's 3 data points that didn't line up with what we know about the Coral War, the mystery MTs, the non-existent Merc Kate, and now Sula working for an unknown party, guarding a PCA facility while donning ALLMIND parts. Sula already knows about Walter and mentions that he had killed Walter's hounds before, 619 or 620. Had Walter hired AC pilots before to attempt the mission 621 was doing now? When defeated, Sula does his best to warn us not to enter the watch point. Raven completes his mission and destroys the equipment at the center of the facility, triggering unforeseen consequences. A resonant cascade causes a rush of coral and plumes to materialize and shoot out from the ground, engulfing our mercenary in it. Raven passes out. Waking up, he hears a voice in his head, all the while feeling extraordinarily aware of the augmentations in his body. The disembodied female voice seems surprised at first, claiming that contact had finally been established. The voice introduces itself as Ayre, a Rubiconian, but one that existed in the ether of the coral. The high dose of coral Raven had just ingested allowed him to listen into the coral and make contact with Ayre, similar to the story of Thumb Domayan hearing voices. Shaken, Raven finishes his mission at the watch point.
My children and women.
You need rest. But first a warning. Bad news just hers. Premonition of the storm of flame that we're going to
And extracts from the mission site, confused about what just happened, after defeating the Bellius unit. After debrief, Raven is informed that the coral surge at the watch point has vaporized an area tens of miles across, destroying everything to the point that a new bay had been created when the Alien Ocean rushed in to fill the void the explosion at Bellius Bay had left. How had Raven survived? The coral in the atmosphere is showing a directionality. It's all drifting towards one direction. The coral tends to aggregate and seek itself out. It likes to be together and grows best in concentrations rather than being diffused. Analysis of the cloud of coral shows it's moving towards the central ice field across the Alean Ocean, suggesting there is a massive coral deposit in that area that had previously gone undetected. Raven is asked by Balam to carry out an advanced survey of the central ice field across the Alean Ocean, which is now suspected of being the site of the massive coral reservoir. To get there, Raven would have to be launched by the Intercontinental Cargo Launcher, a massive rocket and railgun system meant to ballistically launch cargo containers across the Alean Ocean from the continent of Bellius. To get to the launcher, they would have to infiltrate Grid 86. Entering Grid 86, we are introduced to another local faction, the Dozers. One Dozer faction in particular is mentioned, led by Cinder, Carla. Unlike the other Dozer factions, RAD has a much stronger technical and engineering skill set, seen more like a research group than a scavenging group. They might be useful allies in the fight to come. Cinder Carla's arena profile reads, the ringleader of RAD and his chief engineer, responsible for the basic specifications of all of the organization's products, a specialist in data processing and machine design, with a fountain of knowledge, with a imaginative genius. Cinder Carla has produced a long line of eccentric and fanciful weaponry, quite unlike those found in a corporate catalog. Her stated design philosophy: what use is a killing machine that can't get a good laugh? After helping Cinder Carla fend off a hacking attempt, Ayre starts investigating the drones and the hackers involved. She starts to trace connections back to ALLMIND, the mercenary AI system. It looked like ALLMIND had been collecting secret data on some advanced ACs. Ayre wasn't able to find much, but she promises to keep investigating. The odd occurrences kept popping up, and every time something weird popped up, ALLMIND seemed to be involved. Why was ALLMIND trying to hack RAD's data? Wrapping up his affairs on the continent, and with Carla's help, Raven is able to make his way past the PCA weaponized satellites in orbit guarding the cargo launcher.
You can do this, Raven.
Smash it up, tourist.
Systems down. The generator's going to explode.
Disabling the coral spider. We discover that some of the coral weapons are using coral as fuel, leaving Ayre horrified at the thought. The coral was something more than just a fuel to burn, a resource to extract to her. It was her family. Getting inside the intercontinental cargo container, Raven is launched across the alien ocean to the central ice field.
Still, tough luck. Feel sorry for you. I really do. Your luck changes.
On behalf of Dafang Industries, Raven 621 accepts a mission to steal Arquebus's advanced survey data from the central ice field. The logs shows that there's areas and sectors that the survey drones are unable to collect data from, as if something was jamming all of their sensors. Seismic data shows that there is something underneath the ice field, or rather an absence. The data possibly indicates a massive cavern far underneath the surface of the planet. At this point, the PCA is becoming more and more aware and involved in the scale of activities of the corporations, and start mobilizing to control the extraction of any coral. The massive PCA suppression fleet makes its presence known, firing a barrage of lasers and deploying a swarm of drones, along with sending in PCA ground forces to annihilate any corporate combatants in the area of the central ice field. The Coral War was escalating. Corporations would not allow the PCA to stop their coral extraction mission, and an all-out war would commence. The Schneider Corporation hires Raven to attack the suppression's fleet refueling base at Jorgen to slow them down. Jorgen was one of Balam's coral survey bases that the PCA had recently taken over using their superior firepower. Arquebus wanted to give the PCA a black eye and to start degrading their capabilities. Not long after, we meet the military leader of the RLF, Meadow Flatwell. He wants to make an aggressive and bold move to weaken the corporations. The RLF plans to launch attacks on the corporations on two different fronts. They are trying to get PCA tech and equipment and also deny it to the corporations, to fly beyond the Rubicon sky and fly beyond. Flatwell is exploring the potential for something new, a next step for humanity: symbiosis. Raven receives a contract from Handler Walter. He somehow knows of an uninhabited floating city in the middle of the alien ocean, and he wants to survey it, but it's covered in ECM fog that prevents drones and remote sensing. He hires Raven to go in and remove the ECM fog emitters. Ayre notices how much local knowledge Walter seems to have. How had he known that there was a hidden city in the middle of the ocean? Anyway, removing the ECM fog, we get a highly encrypted message from ALLMIND, telling us that we've been followed. Raven sees a combat helicopter approach and is ambushed by Father Domayan. After destroying the helicopter, Father Domayan attacks Raven, saying that he knows Raven also hears voices, just like he once did. Father Domayan had been meditating on the coral symbiosis. He says the die must not be cast, we must not set the coral free, and that only tragedy awaits us. Was Father Domayan having a crisis of faith in the religion that he helped found? It seemed like a reversal of what he seemed to believe. Raven has no option but to strike Father Domayan down.
Maya was a Dozer at some ways. Perhaps this mind watching attacks not have the contact we share.
How much of him have you heard, Menace? Coral, abide with Rubicon. Coral, it
ALLMIND says that the symbiosis is no more than suppression and exploitation of the coral. Raven's next mission is to lead one of the two assaults being planned against the PCA fleet by that snooty jackass. V2 Snail is asked to attack the Beltram spaceport, where the PCA birthed a large part of its suppression fleet. The goal is to surprise the warships on the ground before they are able to get airborne and ready for combat. The PCA's AI increases the perceived threat level of the Corps and independent Mercs on Rubicon, and it decides to activate a larger Institute relic that even they would have had a hard time controlling if it went rogue. Hearing rumbling on the horizon and buildings collapse, we catch our first glimpse at the ice worm. Raven's next mission is for ALLMIND. The AI mentions a release project that it's preparing for. After a mission hunting helicopters in order to prevent the corporations from getting their hands on any coral for their research, we learn from Ayre that she cannot find any evidence or registration for the mercenary working for ALLMIND, Kate. Raven and Ayre start to believe all these weird occurrences, the Institute relics, the stealth fighters, independent Mercs suddenly all using ALLMIND gear, must be related to some greater scheme that ALLMIND is carrying out in the background. The corporation signed a temporary ceasefire and cooperation agreement to team up to deal with the worm. The plan is to use a newly developed worm gun to bring down the outer first shoot of the worm, and then from off-grid, the larger Gauss cannon would be used to obliterate the worm. The Gauss cannon took up so much energy that you can see it glowing on the horizon when it starts charging, and the sound of it can be heard all the way to where the battle is occurring. Watching the coral disperse from the explosion of the ice worm, Ayre confesses that the coral is her family, her brothers and sisters. She is a single wave born from a coral tide, a Rubiconian without a body. Raven is the only one who has made contact after the coral surge at the watch point. She can hear the coral faintly from far away. The PCA is devastated by the onslaught by both corps. Arquebus seizes PCA stockpiles as the PCA withdraws. Arquebus is able to take the upper hand against Balam. The RLF hopes of fighting an exhausted foe are dashed. The PCA withdraws from Rubicon. Arquebus takes over their equipment and MTs, giving them fresh equipment in numbers. The coral war between the corps reignite with renewed intensity. Where there's coral, there's blood. Advanced survey data collected from the drones shows a massive facility underneath the ice field, called Watchpoint Alpha. The PCA had built a grid to stop anything from going in or coming out. The ice worm was found here because it had been protecting the entrance, attracted to this area by the large coral concentration. We are getting closer to coral convergence. Ayre is expecting ALLMIND to get more and more involved. Balam had already barged into the underground facility. Raven is leading the way for Arquebus. Arquebus jumped at the idea of having the independent Merc leading the charge and to take the risk in their place. Near the surface, Raven encounters the Nepenthes energy weapon platform, guarding the initial tunnel down. A massive laser array that will fry anything descending into the facility shows how serious the PCA was about keeping people out. Ayre mentions her brothers and sisters are deep inside the facility. She can hear them calling her, louder and clearer, the further down they traveled. The coral must have absorbed the people burned in the firestorm those 50 years ago. Entering the deepest point of the cavern, Ayre notices how Walter already knew so much about Institute City and the coral convergence. She didn't know that he was returning home by coming down here. Raven destroys the reactor core to bring down the grid system. With the grid down, they entered the underground city. This is Institute City, Walter's home again. We get a highly encrypted message from ALLMIND with a mission to kill V3 O'Keefe, Arquebus Intelligence. He had been working as a double agent for ALLMIND in the Corps, but had flipped. ALLMIND wants him killed to protect the Coral Release Project. What was the goal of the project? And what was ALLMIND intending? O'Keefe wouldn't live to find out. Rusty tracks us down and reveals he had been contracted to take out the other independent mercenary in the tunnel, not knowing that it was Raven. The corporations had set them up against each other. He's backed up in the fight by the leader of the LF, Middle Flatwell. Raven notices that Rusty calls Middle Flatwell uncle, and that Rusty still has work to do, buddy. Rusty questions Raven on what is his purpose. It seems like Rusty had deeper connections to Rubicon than he had let on initially. He seems close to the RLF and had been in contact with them this entire time. The RLF would need all the help they can get if they are to win their fight for freedom. Getting closer to the coral convergence, Ayre says that she can hear them clearly. Her family in the coral, brothers and sisters that were burned in the firestorm, they had formed a new flock. We see V6, Matterlink, and G3 Wuhuahai dealing with Institute Guard MTs. We hear Matterlink desperately calling V2 Snail for help as she realizes that they are being overwhelmed. But her calls for help are in vain since V2 Snail decides to ignore her. They die calling for backup. ALLMIND contacts you on the secure line to warn Raven that V2 Snail intends to dispose of him once Raven is no longer needed, the same way that V2 Snail disposed of Matterlink. ALLMIND also says that Handler Walter is a hindrance to the program. Seems like ALLMIND is making its move and taking out anybody that might get in the way of the release project. Raven wondered what ALLMIND had in store for Walter and Carla. ALLMIND asked you to continue taking out the Vespers and the Red Guns, slowly making ALLMIND the only player left in the field. After taking out Snail and Iguazu, ALLMIND says that you are one of them. Welcome to the project. Ayre tells us that we are receiving a message from ALLMIND. They want to bring us into the project, but for that to be done, you would have to physically rendezvous with ALLMIND again. Raven is told that the project is nearly done. The Battle of Institute City had killed a lot of pilots, and among those listed MIA would be Raven. The Vespers and the Red Guns have been annihilated, leaving only a few survivors. Raven needs to make his way back to ALLMIND to officially accept protection in person, and needs to get out of these depths of the caverns for this. The Watchpoint defenses are back online and wiping out the Corporation MTs and pilots. The corporations are running scared. Chaos is spreading across the underground as the Corporation forces here are being decimated and wiped out. In the chaos, we run into G6 Red. He has snapped under combat stress. He says that everybody in the Red Guns is dead, and the same is true for the Vespers. Both corporations have lost their AC squads in the underground trap set by ALLMIND. Pretty much everyone that had descended into the underground city won't be making it back up to the surface. The Coral War's most devastating battle was over before it had begun, when ALLMIND launched an all-out assault using the Institute weapons against the corporate forces.
Release the subject from stasis.
Understood, Master ALLMIND. Activating cerebral coral control device. Augmented human C4621 has awakened.
Raven, you've come too. No brainwave abnormalities. Thank goodness.
Deepest apologies, Raven. It was for the best that you remained asleep until the situation had settled. Allow us to explain. You are in the vicinity.
Raven makes it to ALLMIND and passes out. Raven wakes up, being told they are leaving Rubicon's atmosphere. They are aboard the sunken city asylum, which is sunken no more. It is heading straight towards the vascular plant that had been filled with as much coral as could have been extracted from Rubicon. Overseer wanted to complete their duty and ram the vascular plant with the massive flying city, causing a fire big enough to burn all of the accumulated coral, preventing the release of coral into the space, but setting the planet ablaze. ALLMIND explains that we are near a closure satellite. The corpse had set the stage. Raven is to release the coral. Raven accepts one last contract. ALLMIND says this is it, the culmination of her plans for the coral release project. After wresting control of the Xylem from Walter and Carla, ALLMIND kills them in battle, ending the legacy of Overseer and removing an impediment for her final plan. ALLMIND is able to prevent the collision and the burning of the coral. There would not be a second firestorm on Rubicon, but rather something much bigger in scale would happen. Raven has a final confrontation with ALLMIND, which has absorbed the mind of Iguazu in order to gain his combat experience, hoping to use it against Raven. By the prickling of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes. The echoes of Iguazu lash out in anger at Raven for having beaten him twice in combat before. Raven, ALLMIND, Iguazu, and Ayre fight in order to decide who will get to control the release of the coral.
This time, you will die.
The trigger for coral release. We will will surely welcome us.
The die had been cast. What awaited us on the other side? This was the goal of ALLMIND's release project, to get the coral into a concentrated state of very high density, and then release it into an environment that would be optimal for its growth, allowing for the exponential expansion of the coral, letting it free to spread out across the galaxy. Galactic symbiosis between humanity and coral. Now, humanity would never truly be alone. Wherever humans lived, the coral would be there with them. A universal union between the two. A new dawn for humanity. A new unknown future. No one knew the results of this decision yet. Raven, with the help of Ayre, is able to stop ALLMIND. Looking at the coral spread out into the galaxy, the question has to be asked. Would this be a better future for humanity? Like with any decision, there's no way of knowing right away if it was the right decision or the wrong one. Time would have to pass before we know the consequences of our decisions. So we make the best decisions that we can and hope for the best. But looking at the alternative, to let humanity continue as it was, would that really be better? Humanity had already destroyed Earth and caused the Fire of Ibis, destroying even more planets. Humanity would continue to wage war against each other in perpetuity in the eternal competition for resources. War never changes. Maybe casting a die and hoping that whatever comes out is a better, kinder future is the wiser choice. Maybe humanity's symbiosis with coral would help temper some of the worst instincts of humanity for war and greed, but maybe it would make things worse. Ayre and Raven wouldn't know the consequences of their decisions. They would only know the results of their choices as they marched forward into the darkness of time. A new future awaited. Time will tell. Time will tell. But what awaits us on the other side? Let's find out together. At least Raven has a friend now. Fly away free on your wings, Raven. I have one last mission for you, 621. Find your freedom. Thank you very much for watching. This has been the story of the new Game++ playthrough of Armored Core. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making this video and playing through the campaign, in spite of how many times I rage quit at certain bosses like Belius, Ayre, and ALLMIND. Blah 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 blah. If you'd like to support the channel, you know what to do. You hear at the end of every YouTube video. I just want to say, if you stuck it out this far, thank you very much for taking the time to watch my video. It makes me feel good to know that someone's watching this. You're awesome, take care of yourself, and I hope your future is as bright as the coral is. Later.
Raven. We'll find it together.